It was one of those perfect summer days that everyone remembers fondly. The air was warm but not too hot, and a light breeze carried the scent of pine needles and fresh grass across the small town of Maplewood. The Carter family had gathered at their lakeside cabin for their annual barbecue. It was a tradition they all loved, a chance to escape the hustle of daily life and spend time together in nature. Daniel Carter stood by the grill, flipping burgers and chatting with his wife, Claire. Their two kids, Ethan and Lily, were busy chasing each other around the yard. Ethan, the younger of the two, was full of energy. At 8 years old, he had a knack for getting into mischief, but his big blue eyes and cheerful grin always made it hard to stay mad at him. Lily, who was 12, tried her best to keep an eye on him, though she often found herself distracted by her friends or her sketchbook. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the lawn, the children decided to play hide and seek. "I'll count," Ethan shouted excitedly, already covering his eyes with his hands. His voice echoed through the trees as he leaned against the cabin wall. 1, 2, 3. The other kids scattered, giggling as they raced to find the best hiding spots. Some ducked behind bushes while others climbed low-hanging branches. But Ethan, true to his adventurous spirit, ran straight for the woods. He didn't stop at the edge where most of the kids stayed. Instead, he pushed deeper into the forest, weaving between the tall pines until he disappeared from sight. Lily noticed almost immediately that her brother wasn't among the group when they regrouped after the game ended. She scanned the area, calling his name. "Ethan, where are you?" Her voice grew louder as panic started to creep in. When no answer came, she ran back to the adults. "Mom, Dad, I can't find Ethan," she said breathlessly. Daniel dropped the spatula he'd been using and turned to look at her. "What do you mean you can't find him?" "He went into the woods during hide and seek, and now he's gone." Claire's face went pale. Without another word, the entire family sprang into action. They called out Ethan's name, searching every inch of the property. Neighbors joined in, forming a makeshift search party. Flashlights cut through the growing darkness as people combed the woods, calling out desperately for the missing boy. Hours passed, and still there was no sign of Ethan. The once cheerful evening turned grim as reality set in. Something terrible had happened. By midnight, the local police arrived, taking over the search. Officers questioned everyone present and organized teams to sweep the area more thoroughly. Search dogs sniffed the ground, following faint scents that led nowhere conclusive. Duao. Next morning brought no answers. The woods seemed eerily quiet, as if holding their breath. Every possible explanation was considered. Had Ethan wandered off? Gotten lost? Fallen into the lake? None of these theories fit perfectly. There were no footprints leading away from the house, no signs of struggle. It was as though Ethan had simply vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks and then months. Flyers with Ethan's picture were posted all over town, offering rewards for information. Strangers came forward with tips, but none led anywhere useful. The case eventually went cold, leaving the Carters trapped in a nightmare with no resolution. For Daniel and Claire, life became a blur of unanswered questions and sleepless nights. They couldn't shake the feeling that they should have done more, that somehow this was their fault. Guilt weighed heavily on both of them, though they never spoke about it openly. Daniel buried himself in work, spending long hours at the office, to avoid thinking about what might have happened to his son. Claire threw herself into volunteering at the church and helping neighbors, perhaps hoping that doing good would somehow bring Ethan back. Lily struggled in her own way. She felt responsible because she'd been the one leading the game that day. What if she hadn't let Ethan run so far ahead? What if she'd followed him instead of staying near the house? These thoughts haunted her constantly, even as she grew older and moved away for college. She visited her parents regularly but avoided talking about Ethan whenever possible. It was too painful, especially since she'd been the last person to see him before he disappeared. Meanwhile, strange rumors began circulating around Maplewood. People claimed to see lights flickering above the lake late at night, glowing faintly, like fireflies but moving too deliberately to be natural. Others reported hearing laughter coming from the woods, soft and melodic, just loud enough to make your skin crawl. Some dismissed these stories as mere superstition, The kind of thing people say when they don't understand what really happened, but others weren't so sure. Old Mrs. Harper, who lived down the road from the Carters, swore she saw something unusual the night Ethan went missing. She told anyone who would listen that she'd spotted a bright flash of light near the edge of the woods, followed by silence so complete it felt unnatural. No one knew what to make of her story, but it added to the growing sense that Ethan's disappearance wasn't ordinary. Despite all the speculation, no one could explain what had happened to the boy. As the years passed, the memory of Ethan faded. For some, but for his family, it remained painfully fresh. They never stopped hoping he would come back, even as hope itself began to feel like a cruel joke. 32 years later, they still lit a candle for him every year on the anniversary of his disappearance, clinging to the belief that somewhere, somehow, Ethan was still alive. And maybe, just maybe, the truth was waiting to be uncovered. 32 years had passed since Ethan's disappearance, but for the Carter family, time hadn't healed all wounds. Daniel, now in his late 60s, spent most of his days working at the office or tinkering in the garage. He kept himself busy, avoiding the silence that came when he stopped moving. His hands were always occupied, fixing things, building shelves, anything to keep his mind off the emptiness inside. Claire, on the other hand, found solace in helping others. She volunteered at the local church, organized charity events, and visited sick children in the hospital. To those who didn't know her story, she seemed like a cheerful, selfless woman. But those closest to her could see the sadness in her eyes, even after all these years. Lily, now 44, had built a life far away from Maplewood. She lived in Chicago with her husband Robert and their 2 teenage daughters. Though she tried to move on, Ethan's memory lingered in the back of her mind. She often wondered if she'd ever find closure. Sometimes late at night she would sit alone in her study, flipping through an old photo album filled with pictures of her brother. In those moments she felt guilty for leaving her parents behind, for not being there to help them cope. Still, visiting Maplewood was hard. Every corner of the town reminded her of Ethan. The woods where he disappeared, the lake where they used to swim, even the cabin itself. It was easier to stay away. The Carters rarely spoke about Ethan anymore. When they did, it was usually during holidays or special occasions when the family gathered. Even then, the conversations were brief and guarded, as though saying too much might reopen old wounds. They lit a candle for him every year on the anniversary of his disappearance, quietly, remembering the boy who had been such a bright part of their lives. For Claire, it was a way to keep his memory alive, to remind herself that he wasn't just a ghost from the past. For Daniel, it was a ritual he performed out of obligation, though he never admitted it aloud. And for Lily, it was a chance to honor the little brother she still missed deeply. But life in Maplewood had changed over the decades. Many of the families who once lived there had moved away, and new people had taken their place. The town had grown quieter, less lively than it used to be. Yet, strange stories about the woods persisted. Locals whispered about eerie lights seen, hovering above the lake at night, or faint laughter echoing through the trees. Some claimed to have spotted shadowy figures standing at the edge of the forest, watching silently before vanishing without a trace. These tales became part of the town's folklore, passed down from one generation to the next. Most dismissed them as superstition, but a few believed there was something more to them, something connected to Ethan's disappearance. One chilly autumn evening, Claire sat alone in the living room, staring at an old photograph of Ethan. He was smiling brightly, his arms wrapped around Lily, who looked annoyed but amused at the same time. Claire sighed, running her fingers over the frame. She wished she could turn back time, go back to the days when her family was whole. Just as she set the picture down, she noticed something unusual on the coffee table, an envelope addressed to her in shaky handwriting. Her heart skipped a beat. Who would send her a letter? She didn't recognize the handwriting, and there was no return address. Carefully, she opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The message inside was short but sent chills down her spine. Look under the old oak tree. Attached to the note was a crude map drawn in pencil, showing landmarks near the lake house. One spot was marked with an X. Claire stared at the note, her mind racing. Was this some kind of prank? Or was it real? The handwriting looked shaky, almost childlike, but there was something familiar about it. She couldn't explain why, but the note gave her a strange sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, it was a clue, a lead after all these years. She called Daniel into the room and showed him the letter. At first, he thought it was nonsense, but something about Claire's determination made him hesitate. "We should check it out," Claire said firmly. "What if it's real?" Daniel frowned. "It's probably nothing, someone messing with us." "But what if it's not?" Claire pressed. "What if it's Ethan?" The idea hung in the air between them. Neither wanted to get their hopes up, but neither could ignore the possibility either. Reluctantly, Daniel agreed to investigate. They decided to wait until morning, when they could see clearly, and asked Lily to join them. Though hesitant, Lily agreed, knowing how important this was to her parents. The next day, the three of them drove to the lake house. The cabin looked the same as it always had, though slightly weathered by time. As they walked toward the woods, Claire clutched the map tightly, her hands trembling. They followed the landmarks on the paper, making their way deeper into the forest. The air grew cooler, and the sunlight filtered weakly through the dense canopy of leaves. Finally, they reached the old oak tree, a massive gnarled thing with roots twisting like giant fingers into the earth. "It's here," Claire whispered, pointing to the base of the tree. Daniel knelt down and began clearing away the moss and dirt covering the roots. After a few minutes, his fingers brushed against something metallic. He dug deeper, revealing a small metal box partially buried in the soil. Everyone held their breath as he pried it open. Inside, they found a collection of items: faded photographs, drawings, and a journal wrapped in plastic to protect it from the elements. Tears welled up in Claire's eyes as she flipped through the contents. One of the photos showed Ethan standing in front of the lake, grinning widely. Another depicted him sitting under the very oak tree they were standing near. The drawings were detailed sketches of strange landscapes, glowing plants, crystalline structures, and humanoid figures with elongated limbs, but it was the journal that caught their attention. Written in Ethan's unmistakable scrawl, the entries described encounters with beings he called the Luminae. According to the journal, they lived in a hidden world beyond the woods, and had taken him there. "He's alive," Claire murmured, clutching the journal to her chest. "He's been alive all this time." Daniel and Lily exchanged uneasy glances. What did this mean? If Ethan was alive, where was he? And why had he left this box behind? The answers weren't clear, but one thing was certain. Their lives were about to change forever. As they stood beneath the ancient oak tree surrounded by the quiet hum of the forest, the Carters felt a mix of emotions: hope, fear, disbelief. Whatever lay ahead, they knew they couldn't turn back now. For 32 years they had searched for answers. Now finally, they had a lead. Whether it would bring them closer to Ethan or deeper into mystery remained to be seen. The Carters couldn't believe what they had found. For 32 years they had searched for answers about Ethan's disappearance, and now, here it was. A journal written by their son and brother, detailing his experiences in a hidden world. It was overwhelming, almost too much to process. Claire read through the entries carefully, her hands trembling as she turned each fragile page. Daniel paced back and forth, muttering under his breath, while Lily sat quietly, staring at the sketches of glowing landscapes and strange creatures. Ethan's words painted a picture of wonder and fear. He described being taken by beings he called the Luminae, tall, luminous figures who seemed neither human nor animal. They communicated without speaking, using lights and colors to convey meaning. According to the journal, the Luminae weren't hostile. They were curious about humans and wanted to learn more about them. But living among them came at a cost. Once someone entered their world, leaving became nearly impossible. One entry stood out to Claire. Ethan wrote about a gateway hidden deep within the woods, a massive stone archway covered in vines. This was how the Luminae traveled between worlds, and it was also how Ethan had been brought to their realm. The final pages of the journal hinted that the gateway might still exist, though finding it wouldn't be easy. Ethan warned that only those with a strong connection to the Lumini could locate it. "We need help," Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. "This is beyond us." Claire nodded slowly. "But who can we trust? Who would even believe this?" Lily thought for a moment before suggesting someone. "What about Sam Bennett? He knows these woods better than anyone." Sam Bennett was a retired geologist who had lived in Maplewood his entire life. He had spent decades studying the area's unique rock formations and underground caves. More importantly, he had always been kind to the Carter family, offering support during the darkest days after Ethan's disappearance. If anyone could make sense of the journal and the map, it was him. The next morning, the Carters visited Sam at his cabin on the outskirts of town. His home was cluttered with books, maps, and mineral samples, but there was a warmth to the place that made visitors feel welcome. When they explained what they had discovered, Sam listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. He examined the journal and the map closely, running his fingers over the drawings of the stone archway. "This is incredible," Sam said finally. "If what you're saying is true, this could change everything we know about our world." He paused, looking at each of them in turn. "But are you ready for what comes next? Once you step through that gateway, there's no turning back." Claire met his gaze firmly. "We have to try. We owe it to Ethan." Sam nodded. "Then I'll come with you. You'll need someone who understands the terrain, and maybe someone who can keep a level head if things get strange." With Sam's guidance, they prepared for the journey ahead. They packed flashlights, ropes, food, and water, along with cameras and notebooks to document whatever they found. The map led them deeper into the woods than any of them had ever ventured before. The air grew cooler and the trees seemed taller, their branches twisting together to block out the sky. Strange noises echoed around them. Soft rustling, distant whispers, and the occasional hum that seemed to vibrate in their chests. After hours of hiking, they reached the spot marked on the map. At first, all they saw was a wall of thick vines hanging from an overgrown stone structure. But as they cleared away the vegetation, the outline of the archway emerged. It was massive, easily 10 feet tall, with intricate carvings etched into its surface. Faint traces of light pulsed within the stones, casting an eerie glow that illuminated the surrounding area. "This is it," Lily whispered, her voice filled with awe. "The gateway." Sam examined the archway closely, running his hands over the carvings. "It's ancient," he murmured, "and not of this world." As they stood there debating whether to enter, something extraordinary happened. The light within the stones began to grow brighter, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. A low hum filled the air, resonating deep in their bones. Then, without warning, the space within the archway shimmered, revealing a glimpse of another world. A surreal landscape bathed in perpetual twilight, with luminescent plants and crystalline structures rising from the ground. "It's beautiful," Claire breathed, tears streaming down her face. "And terrifying," Daniel added, gripping her hand tightly. They knew they had to cross over. Whatever lay on the other side held the key to understanding Ethan's fate. Taking a deep breath, they stepped forward one by one, into the unknown. The transition was disorienting. One moment, they were surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of the forest. The next, they found themselves standing in a completely alien environment. The air smelled different, cleaner, sharper, and the colors were unlike anything they had ever seen. Plants glowed softly, casting a gentle light across the land. Strange creatures flitted between the trees, their movements graceful and silent. In the distance, they spotted humanoid figures watching them. These were the Lumini, tall, radiant beings with translucent skin and eyes that shimmered like starlight. Though they didn't speak, their presence was calming, almost reassuring. Slowly, they approached the group, gesturing for them to follow. "They want to show us something," Sam observed, his voice barely above a whisper. The Carters exchanged nervous glances but decided to trust the Lumine. They followed the figures deeper into the hidden world, marveling at the beauty and strangeness of their surroundings. Every step felt like a dream, yet it was undeniably real. Eventually, they arrived at a clearing where a lone figure stood waiting. As they drew closer, Claire gasped. It was Ethan, or rather the man he had become. He looked older yet ageless, dressed in garments woven from light. His smile was warm and familiar, but there was a wisdom in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Mom, Dad, Lily," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "I've missed you so much." Tears streamed down Claire's face as she rushed forward to embrace him. "Ethan, oh my God, we thought we'd lost you forever." For a moment, they simply held each other, letting the weight of 32 years of separation melt away. But as the initial joy subsided, reality began to sink in. Ethan explained that while he was happy in the Lumine's world, returning to Earth wasn't an option. The connection between dimensions was delicate, and crossing back could have catastrophic consequences for both realms. "We can't stay here," Daniel said, his voice heavy with regret. "But we don't want to lose you again." Ethan nodded, sadly. "I know, and I'll always be with you, in your hearts. But right now you need to go back. The gateway won't stay open forever." Reluctantly, the Carters agreed. Saying goodbye was harder than they had imagined, but they understood that Ethan's life was tied to this place now. As they stepped back through the archway, the hidden world faded behind them, leaving them once again in the quiet forest. Though they returned empty-handed, they carried something far more valuable: the knowledge that Ethan was alive and well. And as they walked back toward the lake house, they couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. Stepping through the gateway felt like walking into a dream. One moment, the Carters were surrounded by the familiar woods of Maplewood, and the next, they found themselves in a place unlike anything they had ever seen. The air was cool and carried, a faint sweet scent like flowers blooming in the dark. The sky above was a deep shade of violet, streaked with ribbons of light that danced like auroras. Everything glowed softly. The plants, the rocks, even the very ground beneath their feet. This can't be real," Daniel muttered, his voice trembling as he looked around. He reached out to touch one of the glowing plants, its petals shimmering like liquid silver. When his fingers brushed against it, the plant pulsed gently as if responding to his presence. "It's real," Sam replied, his tone filled with awe. "But it's not our world." Claire clutched Ethan's journal tightly to her chest, her eyes wide as she took in the sights. She had imagined this place countless times while reading her son's words, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of it. It was beautiful, yes, but also strange and unsettling. Every sound, every movement seemed to hum with energy, as though the entire world was alive. Lily stayed close to her parents, her gaze darting between the glowing trees and the distant figures watching them. The Lumini stood motionless, their forms tall and elegant, their translucent skin catching the light in ways that made them look almost ethereal. Their eyes, large and luminous, seemed to pierce right through her, seeing everything yet revealing nothing. Though they didn't speak or move toward the group, their presence was undeniable and oddly comforting. Ethan led them deeper into the hidden world, explaining what he had learned during his time there. "The Lumini aren't like us," he said softly. "They don't live in the same way we do. They're connected to this place, to its energy, its life force. That's why everything here feels so alive." As they walked, the landscape changed subtly. The glowing plants grew denser, forming tunnels of light that arched overhead. Crystalline structures rose from the ground, some towering high into the sky, others small and delicate like sculptures. Each step revealed something new: a stream of water that sparkled like diamonds, a cluster of floating orbs that hovered silently in the air, pulsing with color. "They brought me here because they wanted to understand humanity," Ethan continued. "At first I was scared. I thought they'd hurt me, but they didn't. They just watched and listened." "What did they want to know?" Lily asked, her voice hesitant. "Everything," Ethan replied. How we think, how we feel, how we connect with each other. They don't have families or friends the way we do. They exist as part of something bigger, a collective. But they're curious about individuality, about love and loss and hope. Claire wiped away tears as she listened. Hearing Ethan talk, like this, so mature, so wise, was both comforting and heartbreaking. He wasn't the little boy who had vanished all those years ago. He was someone else now, shaped by experiences none of them could fully comprehend. But why couldn't you come back? Daniel asked sharply, his frustration boiling over. Why leave us wondering for 32 years? Ethan hesitated, his expression pained. It's complicated. Crossing between worlds isn't easy. The Lumini kept me safe, but leaving would have broken the connection between our worlds. If I'd tried, it might have caused damage to both places. So you chose to stay, Claire said quietly, her voice heavy with sadness. I didn't choose, Ethan corrected her. It wasn't my decision. But over time I realized I could help bridge the gap between humans and the Lumine. I could show them what it means to care, to love, to grieve, and maybe, in doing so, I could protect both worlds. The group fell silent as they absorbed his words. Despite the beauty surrounding them, there was no denying the weight of what Ethan had sacrificed. He had given up his old life to become part of this strange, wondrous place, a guardian of sorts standing between two realms. As they ventured further, the Lumini began to interact more directly. Some approached the group, their movements fluid and graceful. They didn't speak, but they communicated through gestures and flashes of light that danced across their bodies. To the Carters' surprise, they could almost understand the messages, feelings of welcome, curiosity, and reassurance. One of the Lumini extended a hand toward Claire, its touch cool and gentle. She gasped softly, feeling a wave of emotions wash over her, not her own, but those of the being before her. It was as if it was sharing its thoughts, its memories, its essence. For a brief moment, she saw glimpses of the hidden world through its eyes, vast landscapes filled with light, endless cycles of growth and renewal, and a profound sense of unity. They're amazing, Lily whispered, watching another Lumini guide Sam toward a cluster of glowing crystals. The elderly man examined them closely, his scientific instincts kicking in despite the strangeness of the situation. They are, Ethan agreed. But they're also fragile. This world depends on balance. Too much interference from ours or theirs could destroy it. The realization hit the Carters hard. As much as they wanted to bring Ethan home, they understood now that it wasn't possible. His role here was too important, too vital to the survival of both worlds. Leaving him behind would mean losing him again, but keeping him trapped in their world would risk far greater consequences. Eventually, the group reached a clearing where a massive crystal structure stood at the center. Its surface shimmered with intricate patterns, shifting and changing as though alive. The Lumine gathered around it, their lights growing brighter as they focused their energy on the structure. This is the heart of their world, Ethan explained. It's what keeps everything connected. The gateway, the forests, even the stars above. Without it, this place would collapse. The Carters stared in awe, unable to look away. The crystal pulsed with a rhythm that matched their own heartbeats, creating a sense of harmony that transcended language. For the first time since entering the hidden world, they truly felt at peace. But peace came with a price. As the Lumini turned their attention back to the group, Ethan stepped forward, his expression solemn. You need to go back soon, he told them. The gateway won't stay open forever, and staying here too long could weaken the connection. Claire shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, we can't leave you again. You have to, Ethan insisted. This is my home now, but knowing you're out there, that you're safe and happy, it's enough for me. Daniel clenched his fists, struggling to hold back his emotions. It's not fair. I know, Ethan said softly. But life rarely is. All I ask is that you remember me, not as the boy who disappeared, but as the person I've become, someone who's making a difference, even if you can't see it. The words stung, but they also brought clarity. The Carters had spent 32 years searching for answers, clinging to the hope of finding Ethan exactly as he'd been. Now, faced with the truth, they realized that letting go wasn't about forgetting. It was about accepting the journey he had taken and honoring the choices he had made. Reluctantly, they prepared to leave. The Lumine guided them back to the Y gateway, their lights dimming slightly as if bidding farewell. As the Carters stepped through the archway, the hidden world faded behind them, leaving only the quiet forest and the lingering memory of what they had witnessed. Though they returned to their ordinary lives, nothing would ever be the same. They carried Ethan's story with them, a reminder that sometimes the greatest mysteries lie not in finding answers, but in learning to let go. The journey back from the hidden world felt surreal, almost dreamlike. As the Carters emerged from the stone archway, the forest around them seemed dull and lifeless compared to the vibrant realm they had just left behind. The air was cooler, now carrying the scent of damp earth and pine needles. Birds chirped faintly in the distance, and the rustling of leaves in the breeze was the only sound breaking the silence. For a long moment, no one spoke. Each member of the group was lost in their own thoughts, processing what they had seen and experienced. Claire clutched Ethan's journal tightly to her chest, her fingers tracing the worn cover as if it might offer some comfort. Daniel stared blankly at the ground, his jaw clenched as he wrestled with emotions he couldn't quite put into words. Lily wiped away tears that kept spilling down her cheeks, while Sam stood quietly, leaning on his walking stick, his expression thoughtful, but unreadable. Finally, Claire broke the silence. "He's happy," she said softly, her voice trembling. "That's all that matters." Daniel nodded slowly, though his eyes remained distant. "I know, but it doesn't make this any easier." "It never will," Lily added, her voice barely above a whisper. "But maybe we don't have to let it hurt so much anymore." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For 32 years, the Carters had carried the weight of Ethan's disappearance like a burden they could never set down. Every unanswered question, every sleepless night, every pang of guilt or regret had been part of that load. Now, standing here in the quiet woods, they realized that the answers they had found weren't about solving a mystery. They were about finding peace. Ethan's decision to stay in the hidden world wasn't easy to accept, but it made sense in a way nothing else had before. He hadn't been taken against his will. He had chosen to embrace a new life, one filled with purpose and connection. Though it meant leaving his family behind, he had done so knowing he could still protect them, and perhaps even help bridge the gap between two worlds. As they walked back toward the lake house, the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The cabin looked warm and inviting, its windows glowing softly in the twilight. Inside, the familiar scent of wood smoke lingered, bringing back memories of happier times. Yet instead of sadness, there was a newfound sense of calm, a quiet understanding that life moved forward, even when it felt impossible. Over the next few days, the Carters shared stories about their experience in the hidden world. At first, they hesitated to tell anyone outside their small group, unsure how others would react. But eventually, they decided to share Ethan's story with the people of Maplewood, not as a tale of loss, but as a testament to wonder and resilience. At a community gathering held at the local church, Claire stood before a crowd of neighbors and friends holding Ethan's journal in her hands. Her voice wavered at times, but she spoke with conviction. "Our son didn't disappear because something terrible happened to him," she explained. "He was invited into another world, a place of beauty and light where he found a new family and a new purpose. We may not see him again in this life, but we know he's safe, and we know he's making a difference." The audience listened, intently, many wiping away tears as Claire spoke. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before applause broke out, soft and heartfelt. People approached the Carters afterward, offering hugs and words of support. Some admitted they had always suspected something extraordinary lay behind Ethan's disappearance, while others simply marveled at the story's beauty. In the weeks that followed, the Carters began to rebuild their lives with a renewed sense of hope. Daniel started working less and spending more time outdoors, rediscovering the joy of simple pleasures like fishing and hiking. Claire continued volunteering, but she also took up painting, using art to express the emotions she had kept bottled up for so long. Lily visited more often, bringing her daughters along to spend time with their grandparents. Together, they created new traditions, filling the void left by Ethan's absence with love and laughter. The strange phenomena reported around Maplewood gradually faded, as if the hidden world had withdrawn its presence now that the truth had been revealed. The eerie lights over the lake stopped appearing, and the faint laughter in the woods grew silent. Some interpreted this as a sign that the Lumini had closed their gateway permanently, while others believed they were simply watching quietly, content to let humans live their lives without interference. One evening, as the Carters gathered on the porch of the lake house to watch the sunset, Claire noticed something unusual. A single beam of light hovered above the water, glowing softly, before vanishing into the night. She smiled, recognizing it as a message, a reminder that Ethan was still with them even if he couldn't be seen. "He's okay," she said aloud, her voice steady and sure. Daniel reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Yeah, he's okay." Lily leaned back in her chair, gazing up at the stars. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" Claire shook her head. "Not in the way we want. But that's all right. He's exactly where he's supposed to be." They sat together, in comfortable silence, letting the peace of the moment wash over them. The pain of losing Ethan would always remain, but it no longer defined them. Instead, they chose to focus on the love they shared, the bond that transcended distance and time. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the trees, the Carters went inside, closing the door behind them. The cabin felt warmer now, brighter, somehow, as if Ethan's spirit lingered in every corner. Though he was gone, his memory lived on, not as a shadow of the past, but as a beacon of hope for the future. And somewhere, in the hidden world beyond the gateway, Ethan watched over them, smiling softly as he guided the Lumini toward a deeper understanding of humanity. His journey had changed him, just as it had changed those he had left behind. But in the end, both worlds were better for it, a testament to the power of connection, love, and sacrifice. Months passed after the Carters returned from the hidden world, and life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. It wasn't the same as before. How could it be? But there was a quiet kind of peace now, one that hadn't existed during the long years of uncertainty. For Daniel, Claire, and Lily, Ethan's story had become both a source of pain and a source of strength. They no longer saw his disappearance as a tragedy, but as part of something far greater, a mystery that connected their ordinary lives to something extraordinary. The annual barbecue tradition at the lake house took on new meaning that summer. Friends and neighbors gathered once again, bringing food, laughter, and music to fill the air. This time, though, the mood was different. There was still sadness, of course, but it was tempered by gratitude for the memories they shared, for the answers they had found, and for the knowledge that Ethan was alive and well in another world. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the lake, Claire stood up and addressed the group. "We've been through so much together," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "But today isn't about what we lost. It's about celebrating Ethan, the boy he was and the man he became." She paused, looking around, at the familiar faces. "He's still with us. Maybe not in the way we want, but in every laugh, every sunset, every moment of wonder we share. That's his legacy." Her words resonated deeply with everyone present. People nodded, some wiping away tears, others smiling softly. A few shared their own stories about Ethan, recalling his mischievous grin, his boundless energy, and the way he always seemed to light up a room. Even those who hadn't known him personally felt connected to his story, inspired by the idea that even in loss, there could be beauty and hope. Afterward, the group released lanterns onto the lake, each one carrying a message or memory written on a small piece of paper As the lanterns drifted across the water, their warm glow mirrored the lights that had once appeared mysteriously above the lake. For a moment, it felt as if Ethan was there too, watching over them, sharing in their celebration. In the weeks and months that followed, the Carters continued to honor Ethan in small, meaningful ways. Claire started a charity fund in his name, supporting families dealing with missing loved ones. Daniel built a bench near the edge of the lake, inscribed with Ethan's name and a simple quote, "Even in the darkest night, stars still shine." Lily brought her daughters to the lake house more often, teaching them about their uncle and encouraging them to imagine the wonders of the hidden world. Though they rarely spoke directly about the Lumine or the Gateway, the experience remained, a quiet undercurrent in their lives. Occasionally, strange things would happen, lights flickering briefly over the lake, whispers carried on the wind. But these moments felt less like intrusions and more like reminders. Reminders that Ethan was still out there, somewhere beyond the veil of their understanding. One crisp autumn evening, the family sat together on the porch, bundled in blankets as they watched the stars appear one by one. Claire pulled out Ethan's journal, flipping through its pages for what must have been the 100th time. Each entry told a story, not just of the hidden world, but of Ethan's courage, curiosity, and compassion. "You know," Lily said, suddenly breaking the silence, "I think he'd be proud of us." "What do you mean?" Daniel asked, turning to look at her. "I mean, we're doing okay," she replied with a small smile. "We're finding ways to move forward without forgetting him. Isn't that what he wanted?" Claire nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Yes, it is." They sat quietly for a while longer, listening to the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore. Then, as if on cue, a single beam of light appeared above the water, glowing brightly before fading into the darkness. No one said anything. They didn't need to. They all knew what it meant. Ethan was still watching over them, his presence woven into the fabric of their everyday lives. He might never return to their world, but he had given them something priceless: the ability to find joy even in sorrow, to embrace wonder even in the face of the unknown. As winter approached and snow blanketed the woods surrounding the lake house, the Carters prepared to celebrate the holidays together. For the first time in decades, there was no shadow hanging over their festivities. Instead, there was laughter, warmth, and a deep sense of connection, not just to each other, but to the memory of the boy who had taught them that sometimes the greatest adventures lie just beyond what we can see. And so life went on. The Carters grew older, their hair graying and their steps slowing, but their hearts remained full. Ethan's story became a part of Maplewood's history, passed down through generations as a reminder that even in the most impossible situations, there is always room for hope. On clear nights, when the stars shone brightest, Claire would sit by the window with a cup of tea, gazing out at the lake. She liked to imagine Ethan standing beneath those same stars, surrounded by the Lumini, guiding them with the same kindness and wisdom he had shown his family. Though they were separated by worlds, she knew they were connected in ways that transcended space and time. In the end, the Carters realized that closure didn't mean forgetting. It meant remembering differently. Remembering not just the pain of loss, but the love that endured. Remembering not just the questions that remained unanswered, but the wonder of having glimpsed something beyond comprehension. And as they looked out at the lake, bathed in moonlight, and framed by towering pines, they felt a profound sense of gratitude for the life they had shared, for the answers they had found, and for the knowledge that somewhere, somehow, Ethan was still with them. Because even in the darkest night, stars still shine.